Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Great to be here.
So wanted to really talk today about the M&A side of things. I keep CNBC on in my office most days, and you see varying headlines. You'll see anomalies where there's a big exit, but you mostly read about depressed exit activity, really all M&A activity. But I know you and I, we don't work with Fortune 500 companies a lot. We work with smaller businesses, family owned, or mid-stage startups. So I know we've seen things in a little bit different light over the past 6 to 12 months. So I want to talk through a little bit more about what each of us, primarily yourself, serving on boards, might be seeing behind the scenes as you talk to these companies. But maybe just to set the background, tell us a little bit about type of work you're doing, and maybe a quick few minutes on your background.
Oh, sure. So I've been in technology my whole career. Everything from I was a computer science background, and so everything from engineering and building products up through running engineering organizations, large product management, marketing organizations, as well as operations. And then I founded and CEO of a number of companies and brought in a CEO to help restructure some of the companies and get exits. I've had 8 exits myself and advised several dozen outside from M&A activity. So that's, in a nutshell, has been the background. What I'm seeing is there still is a robust market out there. Now, how many are going to be pulling triggers is unclear. However, what I've learned is that it's always good to be prepared. And I think you've heard me say this in the past. It is better to be acquired than to sell, right? You don't want to sell your company. You'd rather be acquired. That has been my experience in companies that I've been able to sell. It's about positioning, and generally it's 2 to 3 years in advance of when you might be looking. And you always have the option to not sell or be acquired, right? But it's always good to set yourself up for that.
Yeah. So one question I have, I talk to a lot of investment bankers, as I'm sure you do too. What do you typically see as far as companies starting a process or saying they want to start a process versus those that actually start it, and then complete it? I hear a lot of bankers saying, "I've never been busier, but I haven't started a single thing," or "I've never been busier. I'm not closing anything because there's a discrepancy on valuation," or because there's not a lack of appetite of buyers or sellers. It's that meeting in the middle from even still like 4 or 5 years ago. So what are you seeing that, I guess, that conversion look like?
Well, I'm going to talk to you from both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
From a smaller company size or mid-sized company that is looking to, they're saying, I'm looking to get an exit
Yeah.
in some period of time. Well, they read everything, or they see CNBC like you do, and they say, "Gee, this is a good time. So I want to do that." And if they go over to an investment banker who will go, do an evaluation and tell them, and they'll look at it from a financials perspective, right? And they say, "I think we're in a pretty good shape." Well, they don't really know until they get into diligence, or they find out what's real in the marketplace, particularly
Yeah.
people who have gone through it before. And so what I always tell them, and the clients that I have that I work with, is we want to make sure that, one, we're valuable, right? Financials are important, and you need to get the financials in order. So the first thing is, and you see this for people who come looking for some cash, right? Looking for some investment, and how their financials, they are running with those financials, but those financials aren't what people are going to be looking at from a diligence perspective. So
I
now
like this is how we've always done it response.
yeah, look, it's working for us.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, but it may not be actually telling your value proposition story well enough from a financials perspective. The other part is knowing what your perception in the marketplace is, and understanding that position, right? Because if you don't set your perception in the marketplace, other people will.
Mhm.
So that's the challenge. So you need to own that. And there's a lot we can talk about on that side about how you prepare 18 to 24 months in advance. On
How are
the,
you
go ahead.
sorry, just to dive into that a little bit. When you're in the board conversations or you're just advising, I'm sure a lot of people, especially founder, own and operate, I'm sure like, oh, it's June. I want to sell by the end of the year. How long could it take? How are you addressing those questions and what are you seeing as companies need to do to prepare for that, 2 to 3 year horizon?
Right. So what I always talk about is value, right? And I'll
Mhm.
tell you that in the companies I've been involved with, uh, I know that a lot of companies want to take a look at multiples of EBITDA
Mhm.
or revenue. And the first thing I advise in the companies that I'm on the board of, I don't really want to have a conversation about multiples of EBITDA. I want to have a conversation about strategic value, right?
Yep.
So what I start with is, okay, who are potential acquirers and what's the value proposition for them, right? Not for you, because I know you're looking at how great you are as a company, or we are as a company. That's terrific. But what does that mean to a potential acquirer or why someone would want to? It could very well be access to market, access to market geographies. It could be technology. It could be,
Mhm.
customers that you have they want access to that they can expand and get a greater share of wallet within those customers, entering new markets, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things are different, and it's different for any type, even either type of potential acquirers. So understand the market landscape and who your competitors are and why you're a better value proposition than them. That has nothing to do with financials, really,
Mhm.
at the moment. It has to do with what is your market position and really understand your market position, right? Don't necessarily listen to just the consultants that you are paying to tell you how good you are in the market or the analysts that you have relationships with that tell you
Yeah.
that where you are. We really need to look critically at that. And then for once you identify, you don't necessarily approach them. What you need to do is find out what am I doing in the market and how am I perceived and what do I need to do over the next 12 to 18 months to improve that value for XYZ, right?
Mhm.
And it may be different. If you think you have 4, 5, 6, 10 potential acquirers, then what is the value proposition for each of those, right? So let's talk about does it make sense for us and how we move along those lines. It could very well be what your offerings are, the customers that you have, prioritizing what you're delivering,
Mhm.
et cetera, to help in that. It's all focus on value. The other
I
part,
sorry, I have a funny, not a funny, it's actually a really good story. You're talking about it's not about the numbers, but strategic value. A friend of mine was the head of marketing at a tech company, and they actually just got acquired. I think they were growing quickly, but they were only doing like I think like 12 to 14 million a year in revenue, you said, and they got acquired for 450, 500 million.
Mhm, mhm.
Not based on the financials, but like you said, it was a strategic value. The company bought them. His company had a very particular niche that they were looking to adapt in technology to compete with their bigger competitor or their bigger players in the market. So yeah, it's because I remember when you were telling me the numbers, I'm like, how do you get to those numbers? Like, well, according to the bankers, they really want X, Y, and Z that we have in our customer base and our technology and our position in the market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not when people are looking at a financials, they aren't taking that piece into consideration, right?
Yeah.
So what does that do for you entering a market, for example? And that's what we look at on the other side of the coin, right? It's what do we need to do to enter a marketplace? Or where's the trade-off that we are making within the company from a board position we're looking at, or even an advising position in our company, how do we grow? And we look at build and buy decisions, right?
Yeah.
And what we tend to look at is what are the companies that don't understand their value, right? So, gee, they have a a customer base or a specific technology that we would like, or a specific even go-to-market strategy that we would like, right? That they're executing on, and how they don't value that, right,
Mhm.
as much as we do. Those are the ones we like to have the conversations with because
Yeah.
they don't understand, right? And oftentimes you can get a bargain, to be honest, because it would cost us, twice as much, three times as much for us to enter that market or to deliver that technology or deliver that service, right? So, and the acquiring company loves it, particularly if they go out and send out signals that they are interested in being acquired. And there's a lot of different signals that you get from mid-sized company CEOs and executive teams that say that they're ready to be acquired. And more
Mhm.
importantly, we see it from VCs who are running out, that their funds are coming near its end.
Yep.
They're looking to get returns. Sometimes it's not they're high risers. They're the top of their priority list is people in the funds. It's not them. It's the people in the middle that
Yep.
have really good, and they can use an investment,
Yep.
which is a lot of the people that you're talking to, right?
Yep.
Who needs some investment. Those are the ones that we would target to have the conversations with, right? So because they don't understand the value, right?
Yep.
And then we'll certainly make the discussion be about financials in that regard. And so we're in a better position at that point. You're always in a better position as a company that is being acquired if you don't need to be acquired. So position yourself so you don't need to be acquired, right?
Mhm.
And then understand your value, right? Then that's where you can actually build a really good win-win situation between the acquirer and the acquired companies. So that's the real goal that we strive for on both sides of the coin.
In so in the market that we're in right now, again, headlines are headlines. They love when things go up, you only hear about the good things. When things are struggling, you only hear about the bad things. You and I play, in similar markets. It's a lower middle market through the growth stage ecosystem. Um, I'm still seeing a fair amount of activity, particularly by those companies that are either founder owned and operated, or maybe have gone through maybe light rounds of equity financing. The commonality seems to be a smaller waterfall that gets paid out. So people can pay less. People can, everyone walks away happy because they got a good return. And that part of the market, I'm still seeing pretty active. I mean, I think it was last year alone, we started conversations, and we're actually about to kick off with maybe 5 or 6 companies in the software space doing anywhere between $5 and $15 million in revenue. In that, a sponsorship profile I talked about, they're like, "Hey, sorry, we got an acquisition offer. My founder is just not can't turn down." So, what are you seeing? Are you seeing anything similar from an activity perspective? Are you seeing, still stalled in the companies you talk to? Or are you seeing there's a lot more active dialogue and transactions moving forward?
Uh, yeah, I'm actually seeing activity on both sides. So
Yep.
several of the companies I'm working with are larger companies. They're
Mhm.
the Fortune 1000 companies, actually Fortune 500 companies, and a couple of them that I'm working with. And they are always, particularly now, they have been for the last year or two, in the acquisition mode, right?
Yep.
Looking for that. That's not necessarily they're going to always pull the trigger on it, but we've built up a pretty sizable list of companies that we're looking at, right? And seeing how they are operating, and we'll watch them operate for 6, 12 months or so, right?
Mhm.
And they're on our target list. On the other side of it, when you're looking at the mid-market companies, the smaller and mid-market companies, they may not necessarily know that, but they've been approached. A number of the companies, and up to $70 million, $80 million in revenue that I'm
Mhm.
working with. have been approached, and a lot of them are tire kickers. Uh,
Yep.
they just want to understand a little bit more, but there are some that have actually understand when you have the conversations about why does it make sense? What's strategic about this, right? And
Mhm.
then you see that, then you really turn your lens on why does this make sense for them, not necessarily for us as a
Yep.
acquiring company, but why does it make sense for them? So I'm actually seeing several things on the small on the acquisition side, sorry, being acquired side, where there's a lot of uh, friendly conversations. I mean, high tech is next week.
Yep.
There's probably 6 meetings that are set up there just that on that alone, right?
Yep.
Looking at things like this, um, because people are actually looking at it because they see this as potential opportunity, particularly since and they actually like that the acquirers really like the CNBCs of the world saying there's not a lot of activity out there right now. Because they
Yeah,
love it.
because then,
They
then
believe
their targets feel special when they're reaching out.
absolutely, absolutely. So that's where we are today.
Yeah. So as companies are working through the process, regardless of what size of the or what side, excuse me, of the transaction you might be working on, what are some of the red flags that typically come up that companies could probably get ahead of by doing the proper planning, like you said, that 2 to 3 year in advance.
Um, One is becoming operationally sound,
Hmm.
right? And efficient. So a lot of companies, they know that they're not as efficient as they need to be operationally.
Yeah.
They know their warts. But look, this is the way we've been doing it, right? We've been successful doing it so far. Look how we're growing. Uh, we look at, geez, if we would make some changes, that could significantly improve. But it's kind of hey, it's not broken, don't fix it, because we're
Yeah.
still working on this. That could be something that an acquirer is going to point to, right? And for their perspective, they're saying, "Oh, we can fix this easily,"
Yeah.
but they use that as um, that's an inefficiency in a drive. And what it does is it impacts your profitability, right? So if you can do the easy things, one from a financials reporting perspective, and as you've seen, um, uh, there are a lot of companies in that space that don't have their financials exactly in order, right?
Yeah.
Or as clean as it needs to be. And it's not hard to do. Once you get it to once you do the right things to put the processes in place and have the reporting in place, it's just maintaining it like you normally would do. That's
Yeah.
a big difference. I'll tell you when you walk in, someone walking in and looking at a company, the first thing they want to take a look at, obviously, is your financials. Uh,
Yeah.
if it's clean, it tells a much bigger story about the company and its ability to operate and knowing their business,
Well,
right?
I know a lot of lenders. I've talked to lenders recently, especially that they're less. I mean, obviously, the numbers need to look good, but they're less concerned on what the numbers say, so much as to your point, are they properly prepared? That's why I tell a lot of companies, the first step is, financial due diligence. And when I say deep, it's verifying that the Excel models you put together are in the right place, you have the right systems, right practices. You can actually answer the questions on the financials. And some lenders I was talking to, and they tend to focus on companies doing in that $5 to $10 million revenue range in particular. But they're like, yeah, it's surprising how many companies you get in there. They have a great Excel, but they piecemealed it together in messy accounting systems. And a lot of lenders we deal with, they structure warrants. That's part of their return is when the deal exits. And like, it's going to be a nightmare just for any acquirer to get in here and clean this up. So, we always tell them, you guys need to get this cleaned up before we're going to write you a check because it's in your best interest. And no company likes hearing it, of course.
particularly founders, right?
Yes.
I built this from scratch. I made and self-funded, and things are working, and we're making money. What's wrong?
On the valuation side, I am curious, with the companies you talk to, are you still getting my buddy at the country club sold his company 4 years ago for X, Y, and Z. I think I should get something similar type of conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Different market, different time, different targets that are the acquisition everything is different.
Yeah.
Every acquisition is unique,
Yeah.
right? It always is. And the reasons they're acquired are unique,
Yeah.
right? For the value that here's a really good story. One of the companies that I was involved with sold at 72 times revenue. And it was certainly not a multiple of EBITDA. Uh, and one of the things that we did, we actually had a investment banker in uh, that we changed because they were shopping us the same way to everybody. And what we did is we put 80% of the package that you put together is the same because
Yeah.
it's your company, right? But the 20% really honed in on what's the value, focus on the value proposition for that company.
Yeah.
Particularly, it's a strategic value proposition for that company, right? And so we pitched to eight. Well, we had two people that were interested in acquiring us, and once you do that, you wake up the other sleeping monsters, and they
Yeah.
all come to the table. So we had eight people vying for us, and we put together eight separate packages. And the top two we kind of worked with, but what we ended up doing is actually we were in negotiations with a third party company, and we ended up doing an OEM deal with them
Hmm.
that threw one of the top two into a significant increase in the options to acquire us
Yeah.
because that made a huge difference. And we knew it. We knew that it would. And so that drives up the value. It had nothing to do how we were performing, and it all had to do with what's the hot button for that company.
Yeah. And so obviously that's a extraordinary circumstance or example. How often are you seeing that there is, I guess, improper positioning or messaging more than actual market or financial difficulties in a company being ready to go out and sell?
80% of the time, right? But if you're looking at, well, when you're looking at large and mid-market companies, they sort of understand what their proposition is, right?
Yeah.
And why. When you're looking at 30 million and below, generally, they don't. Particularly the people who were founders that
Yeah.
are driving that forward. And because they're so much into their business and what they believe that what they inherently believe, the value they were providing, that they don't understand the value that other people place on those. What they think may be very high value, the
Yeah.
acquirer may not, right? And so that's where we need to start talking about, that's all great, but does the acquiring company need that?
Yeah.
Right? Right? Or do they care about that? Or are they going to discount that completely? Right? And that's the hard conversations that you need to have. And they have to kind of step out of their baby a bit and start looking at it in the marketplace with a different set of eyes.
Yeah. That makes sense. So as we wrap up here, you've worked with companies going through exits, whether they're, starting, contemplating, or closing. Um, if you had I don't want to narrow it to one, but one to two lessons, that companies should keep in mind when they're getting ready to sell, what would you say?
Start early. right?
Mhm.
Start 18 to 24 months in advance. Make sure your house is in order, and particularly starting with your financials. And the second piece is, and know what your perception in the marketplace is and drive that perception. It will take 6 to 12 months to drive your perception in the market, and particularly understand who the potential acquirers may be. What makes the most sense for them? Put yourself in their shoes and why it makes most sense, and be objective at it. What you think is
Mhm.
great, they may not, and then make decisions to make sure that you are valuable in the marketplace, but valuable and visibly valuable to who your target potential acquirers are. I know it's more than two, but all plays
We'll
a big
consider it
part.
too.
I think I fit it all in one sentence, but
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. Anything else we should be aware of before we wrap up here?
I the last thing I would say is it's always a good time to be prepared and working if that's your goal for an acquisition, but
Yeah.
recognize that as you're preparing yourself to be valuable in the acquisition, you're also preparing yourself to be valuable in the marketplace in growing your company. They aren't separate. They actually can both achieve the same purpose:
Yeah.
growing the
Makes
company,
sense.
growing the value.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Great talking to you, James. Take
All
care.
right. See ya.
Bye.